Hey guys, I know it's been forever, but I'm trying to get back after it. I've been really busy. Got a new guy over here. His name's Chris. He's my employee now. But I know I've been gone for a long time, and you guys have been wanting me to do some update videos on the project, and I'm finally starting to get back after it here. And so, engine's in the car. Got some fab work to do and things like that, but I know there's still the second part of the transmission assembly video that I need to get edited into you guys, so I'm going to do that on this video, and then hopefully we'll have some new content, because we'll be building a turbo manifold for this car, all the charge piping, intercooler setup. We'll be doing the intake manifold and the valve cover that I have planned for it. And some other stuff, and then engine management related stuff and things like that. So we're going to try to get back after it this winter here. Sorry it's taken me so long, but stay tuned for the rest of the transmission video. Alright guys, in the interest of time, I've made an executive decision to not completely go through this transmission. I've verified with a buddy that he thinks the synchros look okay, and that most of the bearings look okay. And he's a transmission guy. He used to rebuild them for a living, so I think I'm just going to throw this thing back together. I have replaced the races for the diff, because I did replace those bearings. So that's the one set of bearings I did actually replace. But I think beyond that, I'm just going to throw this thing back together. Just basically because I have this huge project coming up, and I'm not going to have a lot of time to work on the car, and if I have any hope at all to get this thing back together in any kind of a reasonable time and keep doing these videos, I kind of need to just get this thing done. So with that being said, I'm going to start reassembly here. The other thing is that with the transmission I'm running, being a TDI, it might not work out gear ratio wise for this engine. I'm not sure how this turbo is going to act and all those kind of things. And then I'm running a clutch that is kind of a Chinese clutch. You can see it in the background there. So that might not be up to par either. So if this transmission does have any kind of an issue, I'm going to possibly be having to pull this thing back apart anyway. So I think that I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So yeah, so anyway, right now I'm just kind of putting it back together. The two gear sets go in together. And then we're going to do the reverse gear assembly, which is this little guy here. There we go. Just had to get that gear underneath the gear on the main shaft there, or I guess the secondary shaft. This I think has to kind of go in with it. So that's the support that we bolt in from the side of the case for the reverse gear assembly. So that's all that. And really these things go back together pretty quick if you're not pressing in bearings and stuff. So reverse gear, shift linkage. So you just kind of got to wiggle stuff around until you sort it out, I guess. So this bolt we can tighten up. I did run one of these TDI transmissions in one of my old Golfs, and I really liked it, but this engine's going to have a lot more revs than that one did. That one was a 2-liter that I had turbocharged, so an 8-valve motor. And it was a pretty fun little car. It only made like 190 horse or so, but you know, it was really nice on the highway to have those tall gears, and I really liked it. So I'm hoping it works out with this engine, but depending on how laggy that turbo ends up being, and how you know, how the increase in RPM range affects the gearing, it might be a little too tall. I did the math, and if I take it to the 8,500 RPM limit that I think it'll have, that's something like 240 friggin' miles an hour. So that's way up there. So we'll see how it works out. So with all that stuff in mind, I think I've decided to go ahead and just get this sucker back together. And then I can start working on some of the fab work and things like that you guys are probably more interested in seeing. I think that's it. And then the case can go back on. So I already bolted these cases together around the diff to make sure it didn't have any slop and could still spin freely. The factory does have a spec on it as far as setting your tensions and stuff with the shims. But I don't have any of the shims, so I just stuck what was in there back in there. And it seems to be pretty darn close, so I'm going to roll with it. And yeah, so I guess it's time for us to do some gasket sealer around this this edge here. Just going to look around, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So that's fifth gear. Yeah, I think that's it. So let me go rustle up some gasket sealer and we'll keep going. Alright, so I got some ultra gray gasket sealer. I'm just going to work that around the perimeter here. Being a little liberal with it, I don't think that there's anything it can really screw up by squishing into the case, so I'd rather not have any leaks. So that linkage there was hanging up a little bit. Got heavier again. I got a pretty good squish going on there. Now we're going to put this pinion brace on. I had to kind of grind on this thing a little bit. Ground there, and I had to grind that little half moon out of there. Basically this transmission, if you can see that little casting mark right there and that little nipple sticking out there, apparently, even though the part number is the same, the German ones have that and the Mexico ones don't, or Argentina or whatever they are. So it didn't quite fit, and I'm wondering if maybe the German cases, even though they're a better part number or the same part number, maybe they're a little bit better case, because those little ribs there actually are internal oiling passages for the bearings on the inside. So I'm wondering if maybe the German case is just a little bit better unit. So I'm going to go back through and torque all this stuff, obviously, but I just wanted to get it snugged up with that sealant on there. And then I'll go back through and torque it all before I'm all done, but get it all assembled. So this is fifth gear. Pretty straightforward, really. So this is the 5th gear slider for the linkage, and this is the one that needs pressed on. So hopefully we can suck it up with the bolt. No, it's not going to start. So maybe we can use a piece of soft aluminum here. Maybe we can get it on far enough to get it started. Yep. So I could drive it on with that, but I'm wondering, I don't want to like mess with the tension that this Belleville washer puts on there, so maybe I'll find another way here. Maybe I'll just keep hammering. But you get the point. They come apart pretty easy and go back together pretty easy. It's just when you get to all the pressing of bearings and things where it gets a little difficult. So it looks like I don't think it would damage this washer by driving it on with that screw. Just because it basically only goes out to the head of it. So all it's going to do is compress the spring in it and then up against the flat of that slider. So I don't think that'll hurt it. So I might do that. I'm a little worried about sliding the slider because yep, see it popped out all the things. But they're still in place, so maybe it'll be okay if I just snug it up with that. So now it's locked in gear. Alright, so I figured out where I screwed up here. This hub here, I was pressing it down with the bolt, but I didn't get these little dogs. Little dogs on the synchro. I didn't get those lined up with that groove. They were like that. So it was just pressing that synchro down really hard on the mating surface there. So that's where I screwed up. Hopefully I didn't, noob mistake or whatever, but hopefully I didn't screw anything up. It looks like it still has a pretty good gap, and I really didn't reef on it, so I'm not too worried about it. But I'm going to continue with the assembly here. Feels a little better. So there's these little, it's kind of like a detent setup. There's 2 springs on this this hub here. Supposed to be 2 springs on that hub there. Oh, there's the other one. So yeah, they're both there. So that little groove there captures both springs and rides on the synchro. And I think that's what gives the synchro a little bit of pressure to start trying to synchronize the gears, start using that braking surface. But on the inside of this slider, there's also oddball teeth that match up to those little detents. So you can't just put this on anywhere. It's got to line up with those the teeth, the little groove there, little cutout. And I've already done this once and it was apart and it was a real pain, so we'll see how hard this is to get together here. I'll have to monkey around with this a little bit and see if I can figure out how to make it work. Okay, so I had to pull this gear back off to get this slider together. But I think in the process I figured out what I did wrong. I think the dogs of this synchronizer gear are supposed to go in the opposite grooves of the little keepers on that slider gear. And I think that's why I couldn't get them back together on there But, you know, maybe just better to put it together before you assemble it anyway, just to make it a little easier. So now I'm going to bolt this down and just make sure those dogs are in the right location as it gets tight. So I think that this screw is bottoming out on here before it presses this gear all the way on. So in the manual it says to just go ahead and hammer that guy home. So we might have to do that, and then this Belleville washer is just to maintain like a pressure on the end of it. The other thing I could maybe do is find a big cup of some kind and still drive it with the screw. Let me think about that. Yeah, so the screw has a shoulder on it, and that captures that Belleville washer, but I think it also maintains the tension, so it's bottoming out on the end of the shaft before it actually drives the gear all the way into place. So, like the manual says, I guess we'll just drive this sucker on. Now it does say to heat this gear in the manual, so maybe I'll try heating that a little bit and then I'll try driving it on. I feel like maybe that's it. It's only got about 30 thou of slop now. Which might be about right, I guess. I can't imagine that it's not all the way on there. Yeah, that's got to be as far as it's going. So I'm going to call that done. Alright, so 5th gear linkage. This slides on and sits in there. So the 2 little pins that locate the rotation point. So I think the next thing we should probably do is these locator pins that locate the linkage rotation points in the housing there. They have little O-rings on them that look like they're in decent shape, so I'm going to leave them. I imagine this is going to be a little finicky to get these in the right location. We're going to have to move that linkage around. So I'm putting the bolts in for the little reverse gear support right now. That's not the right one. I maybe should have done this before I put that 5th gear linkage on, because that bolt is probably not going to be easy to get to. Yep. Alright, so 5th gear linkage has to come back off. Alright, I'm going to go figure out what the torque is for that one since I can't get to it easily. Alright, so those are supposed to be 30 Newton meters. So what is that, about 22 foot-pounds? 22 and a half maybe? I'm just torquing these now because I can't get to this one later. Alright, so before I put this 5th gear linkage back on, I can move this stuff a little easier around without it. Although I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to hook it in after I get those other locator pins in place. So maybe I will put it on now. It's already a little tight, so maybe that's a good idea. Okay, so let's see if we can kind of monkey around with this linkage enough to get this lined up. Okay, so I guess it's time to start torquing some stuff. So I'm going to go find some torque specs and start torquing everything. Alright, so it looks like all these little locator bolts, these torques, are 22 newton meters, or what is that, about 17 foot-pounds or so. So I'm going to torque up all those, and then all these flange bolts that go around the whole bell housing are 25 newton meters plus 90 degrees. And they're probably stretch bolts, but I'm going to go ahead and reuse them. These nuts are also 25 plus 90. So that plus 90 is pretty tight. So since this tranny is trying to spin on me a little bit, I'm going to try to start with the wrench aligned to something on the transmission, just so that I kind of can verify that I'm going 90 degrees from that, since it's spinning. Alright, all those are torqued. So basically we have everything that's in there torqued besides these two big Torxes and these little 4 triple squares. So these little guys are 25 newton meters also. So these triple squares for the 5th gear selector fork linkage. And these big guys are 80 newton meters, so kind of a lot, 60 foot-pounds or so, I think. So I want to say 65 foot-pounds is about right. Shift that guy into gear. Oh, it's sliding. So I think we're going to have to figure out how to get this thing into reverse. Let me sort that out. Alright, I was able to shift this thing into reverse. I don't know if you can see that in there, but that little claw that looks like that is the reverse gear shifter fork. So I was able to shift that into reverse manually with a screwdriver, and then put this 5th gear back into place, and now it should be locked up, hopefully. So I guess we'll try another gear. Maybe reverse isn't what we need. Maybe it's just any of the other gears. Alright, so I was finally able to shift it into another gear, and then I shift this 5th gear in to lock everything up. So I don't think reverse worked. I think you have to have it in 2 different forward gears for it to actually lock it up. But it's working now. So those are torqued. So that's just about everything on that guy. It's pretty much all assembled. We still have to put the cover on. I got to drive in the new axle cup seals and get the axle cups in there. And then the main shaft, input shaft seal has to go on in there. But that's all pretty straightforward. I'm going to see if I can figure out a good way to drive those in. Alright, so I got my 3 new seals. By the way, I got all these parts from a place called Gearbox Shop, or One Stop Gearbox Shop, I think. They were on eBay, and they sell like kits, like rebuild kits for a bunch of the European transmissions, it seems like. And as far as I know, everything they sent me is right, so I feel pretty good about it, and the price was definitely right. I got the whole bearing kit and the seal kit. I think it was about 180 bucks shipped from Europe. So being in the US, that's not a bad deal. I've gone ahead and put this cover back on. The bolts are started. I haven't threaded them in yet. This is the main shaft seal, input shaft seal. That would be the engine side seal for the output shaft of the transmission for your axle cups. And then this is the transmission side. And it seems as though the tool I made to drive the bearing races out of the differential bearing races out fits these pretty well, so I'll probably use that to drive that in. And then the old bearing race fits the little cup with the housing on it, the seal with the housing on it, pretty good. So I'll probably use that to drive that one in. So, turn this around. So this seal goes on this side, and I'm going to put just a small amount of grease on there to hopefully help it slide in a little better. Everything's better with lube, right? Then I'm just going to carefully drive this in. And make sure you get these real uniform. I'm going to go ahead and torque these down while I'm here before I flip this thing over. So this is a new seal that came in that same kit. And these ones are 22 Newton meters also. I'm glad I double checked. It's only 10 Newton meters, which I'm well past. There's that. Alright. So this one's already got some grease on it from the factory. So these ones are 20 Newton meters. Alright, so one last piece of the puzzle here. A little bit of grease. Grease on the seal. Alright guys, well now that I got this tranny together, I'm trying to get it all finally assembled. I noticed something kind of wrong when I was putting the axle cups in. This transmission side, opposite the engine side, doesn't go in as far as it needs to go. So one thing I noticed right off the bat was that the differential does not have the countersink in it for those little taper bushings. So you pretty much have to do away with those and just leave the spring and the spring cup. But then the engine side went in fine, It's only about a 20 thou difference, 715, less than that, 17 thou difference in its flange location than the OEM one, because I measured an old tranny too. But this transmission side is 150 thou out. It's sticking out farther than it would have OEM, and it's not even interfacing the output shaft seal. So, big problem. The only way I can see to solve it currently without taking this transmission back apart and trying to monkey around with those washers in there is to machine the end of this this axle cup down. So the splined end, I could machine a little bit off of that. And I think that's what I might have to do. I don't like doing that because you're reducing the amount of spline that it's interfacing inside the differential there, which could end up being a weak point in the transmission. But I think it's my only option at this point if I want to make this differential work. And I don't really want to tear this thing back apart again, so I think that's going to be the easy solution. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright, so I got this thing over here in the lathe. I'll touch off on the face of it. Set by 0, Z0. Hopefully this thing's not too awful hard because it's kind of hanging out here. Seems like it's alright. Splines are a little hard. So in hindsight, I think that spending the money on a higher quality differential is probably the far better option with how much I've had to figure stuff out on this thing. I've heard nothing but good things about the Peliquins and the Wave Tracks, and of course Quaife is a good brand. But for the Volkswagen applications, it seems like Peliquin's the favorite. Most of the drag racer guys are using those without issue, and a lot of street cars are using them as well. So probably a better option than having to chop up stock parts and make them weaker to run a differential just because it's cheap. But you know, live and learn. We'll see what the thing performs like. And it's possible that I could have possibly changed the way those washers, the threaded washers, went on the inside of that diff. It's possible I could have, you know, there's no instructions or anything detailing how you're supposed to make these things work. It's kind of just up to you. So it's possible I could have done something different in there and possibly avoided having to do this. But, you know, in the interest of time and not having to tear that thing apart again, I'm just going to make this work. I have a feeling I'm going to have that transmission out of there again anyway. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Before I continue, I just thought about something. This possibly might not be bottoming out on the bottom. It might be bottoming out on this shoulder here, which would be really bad because then I just modified this when I didn't need to. So I'm going to go take some measurements and come back and let you guys know. Alright, it is definitely the overall length to where that bolt interfaces that washer on the inside. So I'm going to keep going here. Alright, so I've taken 100 thou off, and I'm going to go test fit this thing and see where that gets us. My measurement said I needed about 150, but I want to take the minimum amount of this as possible, leave as much spline there as I can. So let's go check it. Looks like I need about 40 more in order for it to match the OEM one exactly. But I think it's interfacing the seal just fine now. And I know there's more than enough play in the CV joints to make up for that. So I might leave it where it's at. Let me see where, let me try to get a measurement of where this seal interfaces it. So it touches about right there. So 340. So we're definitely into the seal. The seal's only 230. It's close. I might take a little more off of it. I definitely want that seal working. So yeah, I'm gonna take a little more. All right, so that's 140 thou. I'm gonna go and test this with the retention spring in place and see what we get. All right, so that retention ring spring, again without the little tapered bushing. I like that. We're within 10 thou of OEM. So I guess that's about it for that. I still have to get the shift linkage in, but like I said, might be worth your time to spend the money on a better product. These are obviously made for people that are cheap and cheaply made. So yeah, I mean, this is just a 5-speed. It might not even be up to holding the power that I'm going to make in this car anyway. But I was trying to avoid buying a clutch and flywheel for the 6-speed and axles and all that stuff. So I'm going to run it, and the gear ratios might be all wrong too, but I'm going to run it anyway. So there's a good chance this transaxle could be coming back out, but you know, I'll give all this stuff a test and see what happens. So anyway, I think that's about it for now. So OBX, I don't know, but we'll see if it performs, if it gets decent traction and biases the torque like it's supposed to. Beyond that, I guess I'm about done for now. The only thing left is putting that shift linkage in, which it's got to be pretty straightforward. So beyond that, it's ready to go. So we'll talk to you guys again soon. If you guys are liking following along, obviously this is all new to me, but if you're liking following along, yeah, please subscribe and hit that like button and all that stuff or whatever. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time.